Hey there, welcome to this week's episode of Next Level Play Therapy. I'm Kathy Spooner. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and a registered play therapist coming up on rounding the corner to 35 years in the mental health field. And today I want to talk about something that I think creates a lot of stress for play therapists in particular. I would also say this creates a lot of stress for any mental health professional working with adolescents, and that is, what do you do when you have a teenage client sitting in your office and they're sitting on the chair or the couch and they are not saying a word? You are trying to engage them, but they are silent, or they're giving you one-word answers, and then you're feeling stuck, overwhelmed, and possibly wondering if play therapy can actually work, or if maybe you're not using play therapy, but you are a mental health professional working with teens, then maybe you're thinking they're not ready, air quotes, ready. I heard that one the other day. And I'll be honest, in my head, I'm like, you're trying to get them to talk about their feelings and it's not working. So if that sounds like you, then this episode is for you. Today's episode is really about not trying to get your clients to talk about their feelings and why that doesn't work. So if that sounds like it's interesting for you, then that's what we're going to talk about today. If you're watching the live stream, feel free to join the conversation. Let us know where you're from, what population you work with play therapy, or maybe you're using creative arts therapy or another expressive arts modality. Pop that in the comments and let's get started for today. So today's topic is, can play therapy work with teens? This is something that comes up a lot in Play Therapy Academy, which is my online consultation program for child and adolescent therapists who really want to learn the skills to become a play therapist. So we get into all the core competencies. We get into how do you use a play therapy model and apply it through all the theoretical stages in that model. And one of the things that comes up a lot is, can play therapy actually work with teenagers? Like, how do I use play therapy so it doesn't feel like I'm treating them like little kids or treating them like babies? And it's dedicated to that, because what often happens, and I hear this a lot, is that you have that teenager sitting across from you and they're giving you one-word answers, or they're not even saying anything. They're just kind of pulling their hoodie over their head, or they're just sitting in the chair looking at you with that blank face, and you're thinking to yourself, oh goodness, what do I do now? I can't seem to get this client to talk. And so we're going to talk about the neuroscience of it. I'm going to break it down a little bit and talk about why that happens and what's actually going on with that. And then some tips about like what's going to work more effectively. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is why play therapists feel stuck when you're working with teenagers. And so I know it might feel a little bit uncomfortable what I am about to say. It might sound counterintuitive. My first tip is, stop trying to get them to talk about their feelings. I know you're probably thinking, what are you talking about? We're supposed to get them to talk. That's what therapists do. We get them to talk. We get them to open up, verbalize what's going on, process a little bit, help them get some insight. That's going to give them some understanding of the problem that will lead them to making the change. And that's where the breakthroughs happen. And that's not actually happening, though. In fact, I had this conversation with somebody that I supervise a couple months ago because we were looking at the history of a client, and this client had been through 2 previous therapists and got nowhere. One therapist actually said, "This client's not ready for therapy," and discharged them because they weren't doing anything. And in my head, I'm like, "Oh, there's another way." And here's what happens. What happens when you try to get them to talk, when you try to get them to use insight and use those cognitive areas of their brain, what ends up happening is you sit across from a teenager who's not going to talk, and then you're feeling anxious because you don't know what to do, or you're asking open-ended questions, you're building rapport, you're doing all the right things, and they're giving you one-word answers, or my favorite, which is, "I don't know, I don't remember." I get that one a lot sometimes. "I don't remember." You know, the parent has said to the child with all good intention, "Make sure you talk to Miss Kathy about what you did," or "Make sure you talk to Miss Kathy about what happened. Make sure you tell her this, or make sure you tell her that." And then they come in and they plop down on your couch or your chair, and all the signs are, "I don't want to do this." You kind of sit there watching the clock, feeling like you are failing your client, and you're feeling really stuck because you don't know what to do. If that's you, know that you are not alone, and we have all been there, including me, where I have gone through the internet trying to find like any activity that maybe is going to help my client get this breakthrough, to get them talking. How can I get them talking about what's going on and talking about their feelings? And does that sound familiar to any of you? If you are watching live, then go ahead and post in the comments yes, or give me the thumbs up in the comments. If you're listening on the replay, feel free to join the conversation, post in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Or if you're watching on Instagram, feel free to message me, or LinkedIn, message me. But here's the thing that needs to happen. This is the mindset shift that we're looking at. Because I get it. And we have these conversations in Play Therapy Academy. I know we'll be having these conversations in Play Therapy Elevation Circle, which is my online play therapy membership. We do consultation in there, but it's more like community support, and sharing ideas and staffing cases. We do a book club in there as well and give support that way. So I know that we go to graduate school and we learn all the talk therapy models when we're working with teens. So we naturally think, well, it's a teenager, so I'm not going to use play therapy because I don't want them to feel like I'm treating them like a little kid or treating them like a baby. So I don't want to insult them because that's not going to help with therapeutic rapport and building rapport and trust and safety. So I'm going to talk to them. I'm going to revert back to my adult models and use adult talk therapy models. And if you're working with a teenager who's really kind of high functioning, intelligent, really solid internal resiliency, and a strong sense of self, the likelihood that you can get away with that and that'll work is very high. And if you're working with adults, usually it works pretty well, but I'll be honest, it doesn't always. I've worked with plenty of adults. When I asked them about their feelings, they looked at me like, "What are you talking about? Feelings?" or they're like, I don't know. And they genuinely don't know. And I think that's the case for teenagers as well. And here's why. Teenagers are developmentally in between. They're not little kids anymore, but they're not developmentally, they're not adults. They're in that in between transition stage, and their brains are still developing. We know that the brain develops, right? If we use the hand model that we all learned from Daniel Siegel, we learn the hand model. We right here at the wrist is our brain stem, and then in the middle is our limbic, and the right here where we have the front of our fingers. If you're watching on video, or then you'll be able to see me doing this. If you're listening to the podcast, then this is where, when you make a fist and your fingers are overlapping your thumb, the fingers part in the front is your prefrontal. We know that the brain develops from back to front, that those prefrontal cortex areas are the most advanced, and they come online later. It could be into mid 20s, even late 20s or early 30s sometimes. But we're talking about adolescence. I would even say pre-adolescence, like let's say 10, 11, 12-year-olds, the tweeners, and the adolescents, 13, 14, 15, 16 and 17, they can access those prefrontal cortex areas a little better. Not always. If you've got a child who's got a lot of trauma, or they've pretty hefty anxiety or depression, then it's pretty hard for them to access those areas when you're talking about emotional things. And so when we're talking about adolescence, we're talking about kids who are in between, human beings who are not quite children and they're not quite adults, and their brain is developing. And those cognitive prefrontal cortex areas of the brain where they do their decision making, they are gaining insight and verbal processing, and using those areas to help them regulate their emotions because they can think things through a little bit more. Those aren't fully formed yet. And so when they're emotionally overwhelmed, they literally can't access those cognitive areas of their brain that talk therapy requires, because they're emotionally overwhelmed. So think about it. It's kind of, so what you're asking them to do when you're using talk therapy to get them to talk about their feelings or talk about what happened to them, you're asking them to identify what their feelings are, putting complex emotion words to that, reflecting on the way they feel about it, and then making those connections between emotions, thoughts, and behaviors. All while their nervous system is probably in fight or flight, or maybe even in shutdown mode, because they're overwhelmed. And that's why they're going silent. That's why they're not talking. That's why they're giving one-word answers, maybe saying, I don't know. Or my favorite, which is, I don't remember. Maybe it's not that they're being resistant or challenging, or what's my other? Resistant is my favorite. Not really. I actually kind of banned that word for myself. If I banned it, and then anybody I supervise, I always encourage them to ban that word, resistant. I like the word reluctant, because reluctant to me is a little more descriptive of what's actually going on in the session. And what I mean by that is They're reluctant because they don't feel safe or they don't know how, or they're not quite ready because they're overloaded by what's going on emotionally for them. I can't tell you how many times over the last almost 35 years, definitely 30 plus years, I've had um, a reluctant adolescent sitting in my office and they're kind of shut down. And I just focus on being with them. I just don't try to get them to talk about their feelings. And what I'll do is I'll shift my mindset to conceptualizing what is going on in that moment in a way that, like the way that I conceptualize it is they're not feeling safe. Something is going on. They're overloaded. So then my thoughts shift to if I try to get them to talk, if I stick with strictly talk therapy right now, then I'm not going to get anywhere. They're going to shut down even more. They are not going to experience my office as a safe place because their nervous system is going to be overloaded and they're going to be in what I call danger, danger, Will Robinson mode. Any of you, now I can't remember the name of that space. Oh, goodness. What was the name of that show? They did a remake a little while ago. Now, and it's gonna come back to me after I'm like later on in the day. It's an old show with with the robot, and it was the Robinson family, and they went into space. I don't know. You guys post that on there if you remember the show. And they did a remake probably back in like 2017, I think. Not as it was okay. Not too bad. I watched it. I enjoyed it. Anyway, danger, danger, Will Robinson. Danger, danger. And the robot would like kind of freak out a little bit. Well, that's the brain shutting down because it's an overload mode. And the harder we push, the more overwhelmed that they're going to feel. And they're going to shut down even more. And now I'm going to have to do a lot of repair work to create a safety to help them actually feel safe and not make it worse. So, what do we do instead? One is stop trying to get them to talk about their feelings and give them a way to express what's going on inside, express their feelings. I love using expressive arts with adolescents. And truth be told, I love using expressive arts with adults, especially adults who've experienced a lot of trauma, because we know socially and emotionally trauma is going to um, delay that healthy social emotional growth. So let's say I have an adult who experienced a lot of trauma in their early childhood, and then maybe they had a stint with some substance misuse. I know that's going to shut down growth, even social emotional growth, even more. And so, expressive arts can be a really effective way to bypass the cognitive areas of the brain, or I would even say bypass trying to help them access explicit memories or explicit experiences before they're able to. And we can go right to those implicit experiences, those experience stored away without language, or those experiences that they can't quite access because they're behind the wall, their defense wall. Like back here, I have to keep this really, really safe, and I don't want anybody coming near it. So if we're thinking a little IFS here, internal family systems, we would say those protectors are alive and active, trying to protect those exiles, and not able to really get to those exiles yet. So expressive arts can be a way to do that. There was a trauma model that I learned way back in the day, called structured sensory intervention for children, adolescents, and parents, for traumatized children, adolescents, and parents. What I liked about this model, it was developed by Steele and Rader. And one of the things William Steele talked about was this concept of, I think it's a term he coined, which is iconic synchronization. And the way he described that is that there are things we can't really access through those cognitive areas of our brain yet. If we give those things symbolic representation, so if we use some expressive arts modalities, like this is my addition to what he said. So if we use clay, if we use art, if we use movement, if we use poetry, we give what's going on symbolic form. We don't have to label it yet. We don't have to describe it with those cognitive areas of our brain. We're simply giving expression. So we're giving it symbolic form. And then now it's externalized in symbolic form. And now that it's out there, like in the sand tray, I can't tell you how many times this has happened. I'll just say, hey, what would that, represent? What would that look like if you use the miniatures, as many as you, and you put those in the sand tray? Doesn't always make sense why you feel drawn to a particular miniature. Just kind of go with it. We'll see what happens. And I promise you, it'll all be fine. However it ends up being is exactly how it ends up being. So we'll do that. They'll put them into the sand tray. When I've done this with adults, we are always getting the Kleenex box, because if they're feeling stuck and they're like, I don't know, and they just can't access it, and the more you try, the worse it is for them. They get more overloaded. Then we go to the sandbox, or we use art, or we use some other kind of modality, expressive modality, and then they put it in symbolic form, and now it's externalized. So if it's the sand tray, it's out there in the sand tray, and now, so we're accessing first and foremost those implicit avenues through the right brain creatively, and then now they're out there in the sand tray, and now we have the ability to put words to it, to access the cognitive areas, to explore it and make sense of it. Some kids, though, just the very act of using those expressive modalities, that, to me, that's how we help them access those therapeutic powers of play. So from a play therapy standpoint, the way that the Association for Play Therapy defines play therapy, which I love their definition, I use it all the time, is we use a theoretical model to help clients access the therapeutic powers of play within a strong therapeutic relationship. So that's the safe container, right? That therapeutic relationship. Expressive arts, we can help them access those therapeutic powers of play, of self-expression, or access to the unconscious, or because I love using a neuroscience and attachment lens theoretical framework, I would say access to the implicit experiences. We can do indirect teaching. We can do direct teaching. We can work on kind of titrating anxiety, like titrated exposure to the feared thing, and then use symbolic representation to do that. So what I love about expressive arts is that it can bypass those cognitive areas where they get stuck and give them a safer way to access what's going on because they're using different parts of their brain, and they're accessing those therapeutic powers of play. And from a play therapy standpoint, it's not the talking that actually does the healing as much as it is that process using those therapeutic powers of play to make sense of things and figure out what they need to do with that. They will naturally do that in a way that is healing for them, given that free and protected space. And so that's when the healing happens. And that's how I can't tell you how many times I have seen this happen. And I have talked this through with some reluctant play therapists, or even maybe not necessarily play therapists, because I work in a variety of capacities. And so they're looking at me like, yeah, I don't think this is right. Like, this client is like resistant to therapy, or the other term we use all the time, which is they're not ready for therapy because they're not talking. Well, this bypassing that requirement to access areas of the brain they're not able to access, and giving them another way to do that, opens up a door for them to be able to engage. And I have seen that happen over and over and over and over. And I have seen teenagers, I would even say adults, be very successful doing this. I once worked with a therapist I was supervising. She was working with like a preteen with selective mutism. I think she worked with this client for about a year. And every week, this client would do Santray and would give one word answers for almost a year, every single week. And this client came every single week. And then when we went in and looked at the Santray, and we were looking at themes in the Santray and making sense of those, this child was going deep. This child used those therapeutic powers of play for healing without talking it through. But you could see over time what was going on symbolically, and you could see that this client was going deep. And reports from parents verified the changes that were happening in the child's life outside of the play therapy process. So I am a firm believer that we need to stop trying to make preteens and teenagers talk about their feelings. They're not ready to do it. It's because they're overloaded, and we can actually make it worse by trying to get them to do something they are not developmentally ready or emotionally ready to do. And there is another way to go about doing that, and that is using the therapeutic powers of play and accessing those therapeutic powers of play with expressive arts activities. And to do that, we really need to use a framework. So otherwise, you just get into what I call the spaghetti against the wall method, where you're just like, you're not really grounded in a theoretical framework, and you are just kind of trying this, that, and the other, researching all over the place, trying to figure out an activity you can use, but there's no real structure or framework to it. So oftentimes what will happen is you'll end up feeling lost and not sure what to do. And so I do have a training coming up, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about that if you're interested. That's why I created this training, Play Therapy with Adolescents Using Expressive Arts. And so in this training, I'm going to kind of walk you through the neuroscience and attachment, interpersonal neurobiology, polyvagal things. That's our case conceptualization. That is the lens that we're going to use to look at it and understand what is going on. And then we're going to use an integrative play therapy model grounded in that neuroscience and attachment, that interpersonal neurobiology, using a framework to help you apply not apply, that's not the right word, but using that framework to kind of structure your expressive arts activities and think about what kind of expressive art activities to use, when to use them. And then we're also, because we're play therapists, we're going to do a bunch of experiential activities so that you can take this training and use it right away. And one of the things that I have committed to in 2026, because I'm a firm believer that the training is good, otherwise I wouldn't do them. And I take trainings. I'm actually in a training now. I decided to just, timing was right, finances were right, everything aligned with the right people to do it with. I am now taking EMDR training with Playful EMDR. Shout out to Playful EMDR, because they'll integrate play therapy into it. But it is the EMDRIA model, because to me, it's important to do the gold standard to get it right. So I'm a believer in training. What I'm also a believer in is community. And this is where I see the magic happen in Play Therapy Academy. And also now my new membership, which is Play Therapy Elevation Circle. So in Elevation Circle, we meet once a month. We kind of put our collective heads together, staff cases, talk about specific play therapy topics to stay up to date on things. But then we're going to take that information and how do you apply it? We also do a book club in there, staying up to date. We're on, different important things going on in the field. So right now we're reading Bonnie Badnoch's book, Being a Brainwise Therapist. So applying that interpersonal neurobiology. She has a whole chapter on working with teens, using art, using Santre. So I love that about that book. So for any of you who are new members, not yet members of Elevation Circle, any of you who register and take the training, so like this one is Play Therapy with Adolescents Using Expressive Arts. When you register for the training, you are also going to be getting access 2 months to Elevation Circle. And they're for free. If you're a new member, it'll be for free. The reason is because I want to be able to help you apply what you've learned ongoing. You can stay, you have the option to stay on and stay as long as you want. There's no term commitment to that, and you can stay as long as you want after that as well. My hope is that you will stay and we'll enjoy having you in the membership. But the reason for that is I can't do, like how many times you're like a month after the training, you're like, what did we talk about? Or what were some of those things? Or you have a client sitting in front of you that's really hard and you're like, I'm not sure what to do. Well, to me, having that community of support, those community of play therapists to help work through some of those things, I think really supports you in the work that you are doing. And my vision, my mission is to help you make a difference in your community using play therapy with children, adolescents, and families. So community by community, we can create a better world, right? Where our communities are only as strong as the families in our communities. So my goal is to kind of help create healthy communities by helping you and supporting you as a play therapist. So if you're interested in that training, it's Play Therapy with Adolescents Using Expressive Arts. Then pop over to my website at rhplaytherapytraining.com. Go over to the training page. That's Renewing Hearts Play Therapy Training. On the training page, you'll see all my upcoming trainings on there. And the 2 months of Elevation Circle for new members is available for all of the trainings that I have this year. So this training is virtual, so you can attend virtually. You can attend in person in beautiful St. George, Utah. Or let's say you're in a different time zone and you're like, Kathy, that time zone does not work for me, especially if those of you outside of the US. I hear this a lot. If you're over there in Europe or Australia or another country outside of the US, the time zone change can be a little brutal. So there will be a recorded version that you can register for. The way that recorded version will work is I'm going to record the training when we're doing it live. And then once the training is over, we'll break down the video into smaller bite-size modules. And about a week after the training ends, then the course will drop into your account and then you can do all the things. So if you have questions about it, feel free to message me. If you look on my website, see what other trainings there are. If there's some other ones you have questions about, feel free to message me. If you really want to take your play therapy skills to the next level and you're ready to learn all the competencies and you want a little more than Elevation Circle offers, that would be Play Therapy Academy. I do have openings in Play Therapy Academy right now. So if you're interested in Play Therapy Academy, then schedule a video call with me. We'll see if Play Therapy Academy is a good fit for you, because maybe Elevation Circle might be a better fit. But if you're looking to really develop those play therapy competencies to learn how to apply a play therapy model through all the stages and all the things, then schedule a video call with me and we'll see if it's a good fit. So that is it for today, and I will see you next week. Bye for now.